everyone. Welcome to my conversation, my monologue for the Threads series, Cultural Conversations. This one featuring myself, Jennifer Podemski. I guess I would just call myself a storyteller. It's pretty much what I do, whether I'm producing, acting, writing, directing, and all of the other sort of things that are in between those parts of my job. I'm constantly working towards uplifting and amplifying Indigenous perspectives and voices, mostly because we are still so in the margins, so underrepresented, and oftentimes, unfortunately, misrepresented. And even worse than misrepresentation, and even worse than underrepresentation, is the erasure of Indigenous people in cinema. And I think that many of the things, the socioeconomic realities that we're facing today in our communities are a direct reflection of the way in which we were portrayed or not portrayed in cinema across time. And I think a lot of what I have to say today goes back to really why I got started in this business. I'll answer some of the questions that were given to me by my friend Dawn to help me participate in this in a more focused way. I really just started off wanting to be a performer. That's what I wanted to do with my life. And I knew this at a very young age. I knew that I loved to make people laugh. I knew I loved to sing and dance. I knew I loved to work with people and make up skits and shows and memorize lines and perform. And I was just that kid. For as long as I can remember, I was the kid who, with the hairbrush in the mirror, singing and performing and mimicking and acting and imagining. And it's like, I was, it's like, oh, that's just Jenny. That's what she does. That kind of kid. And then as I got older, I think I was like 4.5 when my sister Tamara was born. And as soon as, she turned 2 or was of the age, let's say 4, that we could, make things together and perform together, I enlisted her right away as a performing partner. So we were very, very young, and at family dinners, any event that we had any kind of captive audience, we would write up little tickets, kind of try to sell them to our family members. That was largely unsuccessful, but we would do shows. It was a whole thing, and it was one of my fondest memories of my childhood was performing with my sister in these little shows that we would do. So I guess in many ways, my earliest dream, as I would watch shows like, the Oscars and, dream of what that must be like to be a part of a group of people who do this for a living as a career and then get up in front of an audience and receive recognition for the work you do. I just thought that was the coolest frickin' thing. And not really recognizing as a, 9 or 10-year-old or 8-year-old, how invisible, like people that looked like me or people that looked like my mom, how invisible we were, or people who looked different, period. Anyways, yeah, so I had these dreams. Of being a performer. Didn't recognize, how white I didn't recognize how white everything was, but I did have a feeling, like an inkling, that I wasn't really seeing much about what my life looked like. I didn't really relate to a lot of the things that I was seeing. in my life growing up, I was definitely living in a reality like many people, who might be listening to this or watching this, that we would call, the expression of intergenerational trauma and what happens to families when they're recovering from residential school. So it was a difficult childhood. And I was, raised in an urban center where my dad was white, Jewish, and also an immigrant who came from Israel, the son of a Holocaust survivor who lost everything in World War II and was in concentration camps, and then moved to Israel and had 2 children, later moving to Canada. And my mom, who is from Muscopine First Nation in Saskatchewan. And the 2 of them had me very young. And yeah, it was not an easy childhood, and I'm sure it was not an easy situation for either of my parents. And my mother in particular, as I grew older, I started to understand the implications, the real devastating impact of residential school and intergenerational trauma and colonialism and the ongoing effects of structural racism. And I can say now, at 50 years old, after being in this career in the screen sector for 30 plus years, that all of those devastating realities are not disconnected from the work of the screen sector. And I'm very interested in shifting that reality in whatever way that I can. I believe that if we as Indigenous people exist in the mainstream consciousness in a way that is authentic and expressive of who we are in all our parts, and not in a monolithic sense, and in the ways that we all are in all of our communities and all of our realities and all of our lived experiences, if that was to be reflected in an authentic way on the screen, it would reverberate. It would have a ripple effect. It would move into the consciousness of society and shift the way people think about us. And that just hasn't been the case over time. And going back to, where I really became aware that being an actor wasn't really gonna happen in the way that I dreamed it would, it became very obvious. And yes, I had a lot of success in terms of celebrity from being in movies like The Diviners, Conspiracy of Silence, Dance Me Outside, of course, and The Res, and then on and on and on. But it was really those big ones like The Diviners, Dance Me Outside, and The Res that kind of cemented my celebrity into, the landscape of Canadian film and television, and a little bit into the States, like in Indian country, definitely more so than like non-native society. But I was like super broke during that time. Like I was not making a living. Had like 10 jobs, I was hustling over here and over there and pawning CDs that I bought when I had money. And then it was very much more starving artist life. And I saw a few of my peers, Asian peers, booking a lot of native roles at the time. And I started to realize like, okay, so basically here I am like working only as a native character. Like I only fit into this role. And I'm super light skinned, if you haven't noticed. So even at the time, people would be like, but you don't really look native. But you don't really look white either. So we're not really sure what to do with you. So we're going to give this role to an Asian lady because she looks way more native than you. So that was sort of the reality that I was in. And I essentially started to put together a lot of different pieces. And I think that it really started with the discomfort and the trauma that I was experiencing in my own life, the addictions and all the, abuse that came along with that experience. And it unfolded step by step as I searched for who I was and what I was meant to be and why I was so different and why I didn't fit in anywhere. Even in, this environment where I'm supposed to be being a part of telling stories about people like me finally. Just didn't make sense. None of it made sense. And I would be like reading scripts and looking at my own life and being like, this doesn't make sense. Like, this is written by a white person. This is directed by a white person. This is, I'm the only native on set on this movie that's about natives. Like, it just, nothing made sense. And I felt even more alienated. More and more alienated as the opportunities presented themselves. So there came a time in my early 20s when I really became very clear about the connection between how we as Native people, as Indigenous people, as Anishinaabe people, and whoever you are and wherever you come from, how we see ourselves, especially those of us who did not grow up immersed in our community or culture or belief systems, how we see ourselves and how other people see us, and the connection between current socioeconomic issues, disproportionate outcomes in all kinds of areas like education and health, how it all stems from propaganda. And having a grandfather on my dad's side who was in the Holocaust and understanding how propaganda essentially created a belief system in Europe at that time that made people believe that Jews were evil and inhuman enough to completely commit genocide on, and nobody saying anything about it. Propaganda was a big part of making that happen. And I started to think about propaganda in America. Propaganda, whether it be in the newspaper or in cinema, in the early movies, created a reality and a narrative that told stories about us from across Turtle Island that were not just untrue, they were harmful, they were dehumanizing. And if you look back, I did go to film school and I did study this exact thing. And I did fail the class that I wrote the paper on that said this exact thing that I'm talking about, that those early movies, especially Westerns, dehumanized our image so much to the point, and our women specifically, to the point that people just thought we were dead, that we were something of history, that we existed in the past, that we were overtaken, that we don't exist anymore, that we were unhuman, and that if we were still around, that we were essentially assimilated. And And these narratives became cemented into the consciousness of society. And on top of that, like, aside from the entertainment component of how that propaganda was propagated, we have the news media and the far-reaching kind of message to settlers and, you know, Europeans to come to this place and start a new life and live the American dream, or live the dream you've always wanted. Leave the place that you're from and come here because there's free land. That is propaganda. It's very windy here, and I think the ancestors are just like, you sing it, sister. So I hope that what I'm saying is resonating in a way that maybe you haven't thought about it before, that what we're really talking about here is not, you know, necessarily making sure that we have authentic storytelling. It's to understand that the reason we as Indigenous people need to take control of the narratives that are being shared in the mainstream media is because our stories not only have not been told properly or effectively or multidimensionally or authentically, and not only because we have been erased from history through the education system and through cinema and through media, it's also because we are experiencing, we experienced the effects of propaganda. Now, this is, you know, my opinion. I know that people do talk about this elsewhere, but this is my opinion. And to go back to how I became a producer, these are the pieces I started to put together. And I remember, you know, very clearly the moment that it happened, because it wasn't a moment. It took so many years to build, but it was sparked in a moment of realization when I moved to New York City to live with my sister Tamara, slept on her couch while she was in a show on Broadway called Rent. And she allowed me to sleep there because I was essentially, you know, trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with my life and my career. And I thought maybe I'll try New York. And in the process, I wasn't very successful there. But I remember sitting, it was like Christmas Eve. It was Christmas Eve 2000 and, no, not even 2000. It was 1998 Christmas Eve going into 1999. And I guess I was 24 years old, and I was sitting there. The snow started to fall. It was like the first snowfall in New York City that year. I believe it was. Anyways, it felt that way. And I was just thinking, I have to become a creator. If I don't become a creator, I can never, ever complain about the way that we are being portrayed and the lies that are being told about us and perpetuated, because there are no other Native people on set, behind the camera, in the writer's room, at the executive level, to stop these lies from being told. I need to be a creator. I need to be a producer. And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't even know what a producer does. What the heck does a producer do? And I just put it out there in the universe, and I said a prayer. And I asked to be shown how to do this work, because I just don't freaking know. But I want to make a change. I want to be a part of the solution. And I want to do it for my ancestors. I want to do it for those who were silenced and for those who didn't have a chance to speak their truth. And I don't know very much, but I knew that I had no right to harbor this amount of anger towards a system that wasn't including us if I wasn't willing to be a part of the change. And that is the moment that I decided to become a producer. And I'm 50 today. Well, not today, I'm 50 and a half. And so that marks, I would say, 25 years of producing. And it has been a ride. It has been challenging. It has been heartbreaking. It has been healing. It has been all of the things that have built my character. I definitely want to quit once a week. It's feast or famine. And I do feel happy and excited by all of the other creators that have come up with me, alongside me, who we see today, Sterling Harjo with Reservation Dogs, Dennis Goulet, Zoe Hopkins, Loretta Todd, Tasha Hubbard, Elmaya Tailfeathers. These are, and on the in front of the camera, people who we owe so much to: Tantu Cardinal, Gary Farmer, Graham Greene, Tom Jackson. Oh gosh, there's so many. There are so many. Gordon Tatusis. The list goes on. And I believe so strongly that in the same way that I value and honor those who laid the foundation for us, for me, that I want to do everything in my power to build on top of that foundation for the next generation. And I know we can do this, and I know that we can take control of our narratives and that we can step into our own power, whoever you are and wherever you come from, to speak the truth and to speak the word that those who came before us, even if it is our own parents, could not speak because they were disempowered. I feel very strongly about the support being given to us by those who came before, who aren't here anymore, that they want us to succeed. They want so badly to succeed. And I made a show called Future History, and when I was writing the introduction to that show for the opening sequence, I remember thinking, someone dreamed about me. Someone dreamt me into existence. I mean, not even someone, many people. I am my ancestors' dreams manifest. And so are you. And we have all of the tools and all of the things that we need to succeed, even if you feel like you don't. It's really about aligning with your true, authentic voice and your true, authentic power. Sobriety is a huge part of that. To be clear and focused and intentional and live your life in a way that aligns with those values that were passed, that should have been passed on to us by our grandparents and great-grandparents and those who may not have been able to do that. And if you did have that, you are very, very lucky. So I actually went completely off in the other direction and didn't answer any of these questions. But I feel like one of the things that I love to do is speak from my heart, because that is truly the most truthful thing that I have to give you. And I can answer questions, but I also feel like questions are premeditated, usually have some kind of premeditation involved, because you have to think about the answers. And I wanted to sit here and tell you the most truthful thing I can from my heart and my spirit. So thank you for listening. And thank you, Dawn, for inviting me to do this. And I miss Saskatchewan. I'm actually going to Regina in a couple weeks. No, in a few days. To my home community to bring my kids there for the first time, which I'm super excited about. Okay, miigwech, bamapi.